I really enjoyed the show tonight for All Elite Wrestling. They definitely continued many storylines from All Out and are building up to the Grand Slam show. I appreciate that they focused on setting up storylines because if this were just a show filled with match after match, it wouldn't work. You have to make people care about matches by having wrestlers behave like characters in a story so fans can get behind them. Otherwise, it feels like a random matchup, similar to Marvel vs. Capcom, where you combine characters without any backstory. While those matches might be entertaining, they lack emotional investment compared to building them up as multi-dimensional characters. Another thing I liked about tonight's show is that many people have been complaining about the tag team division being weak because the Young Bucks have held the titles for so long. The Bucks are better at putting on matches than delivering promos, and they don't look imposing because they're not particularly large athletes. It would be beneficial for them to drop the titles or engage in matches that lead to more tag team feuds and storylines. I appreciated the follow-up with Adam Page and Jon Moxley, as they both had significant moments at the pay-per-view. Additionally, the show effectively set up matches for the Grand Slam at Arthur Ashe Stadium, which is in 2 weeks. However, I'm a bit concerned because All Elite Wrestling has major shows coming up. Grand Slam at Arthur Ashe Stadium, their 5-year anniversary show in Pittsburgh, Title Tuesday in Spokane, Washington, and just 5 days later, they have their Wrestle Dream pay-per-view. They need to be careful not to overbook themselves with special events because it could lead to diminishing returns. Fans like myself expect them to deliver exceptional shows everywhere they go. I want to start with the final match of the show, which was a Casino Tag Team Gauntlet match. I really wish they had explained the rules of this match at the beginning of the show and included a graphic to help fans understand. This match is essentially like a Royal Rumble, where a random tag team enters after a certain amount of time. Sometimes the show informs you how many teams there are, and sometimes it doesn't. We were told there's a maximum of 21 teams, and the way to win is by getting a pinfall. Importantly, not every team has to enter before that pinfall occurs. Tonight, I believe they had 9 teams compete instead of the full 21. I was pleased that they established that Kyle Fletcher and Will Ospreay want to team up. This is because Ospreay owes a favor to Don Callis, and if he doesn't fulfill it, Callis will likely betray him. Even though Ospreay had permission to leave the faction, they still feel like family. I appreciated this storytelling, and I'm glad that the Don Callis family is pursuing titles, as many of the members are capable of 5-star matches and bring prestige to the faction. It wouldn't make sense for them to be a directionless group. One of the big weaknesses of the show was the lack of interviews with other wrestlers about what winning this match would mean to them. For instance, what if they had interviewed the Outrunners, who recently scored their first victory and are looking to build momentum? That would have been impactful. However, I understand that they likely couldn't do that due to the number of promos tonight, so they had to pick and choose. Given that there are about 6 shows between now and the Arthur Ashe event, I think establishing characters and what this means to them would be more effective, with a tournament with matches on all those 6 shows. Because the rules of the Casino Gauntlet match weren't clearly discussed, I initially thought it was going to be a tournament, but it's not. It's a special type of match. While watching this match, I didn't jot down all the moves because it's too challenging to follow when you have over 10 people competing. This is one reason why many fans dislike these types of matches. AEW often features 8-man or 6-man matches, which can become chaotic and hard to follow. It's disrespectful to reviewers because it becomes nearly impossible to keep track of all the offense happening when so many people are involved. The teams that participated included FTR, Will Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher, The Righteous, The Undisputed Kingdom, The Acclaimed, MXM, Top Flight, The Outrunners, Grizzled Young Veterans, and more. This sheer number of participants made it difficult to follow the action. Additionally, another issue I have with AEW is that the show is supposed to end at 10 p.m., but they consistently run over time. They should consider extending the show to 10:15 p.m. if this is going to be a regular occurrence. It's disrespectful to viewers who have commitments and expect the show to end on time. For those of us who work nights, consistently running over is frustrating, as we rely on the show adhering to its scheduled time. They need to prioritize better time management to respect their audience, ensuring that the show ends at 10 p.m. at least 95% of the time. The show opens with Jon Moxley being interviewed. In response to his assault on Bryan Danielson, he states, "We wanted to build something great, something that will outlive all of us. Elite wrestling is filled with people with egos out of control. I know why God put me here. Diplomacy failed. I choose war." This intense declaration sets the tone for the night. Afterward, they cut to Darby Allin arriving at the building, and at that point I was hoping they would follow up with Adam Page, as he also played a significant role at All Out. In the next segment, Christian Cage comes down to the ring. When I see him, it feels a bit awkward. He seems to have gained some weight, and his facial hair is turning white, making it clear that age is catching up with him. He announces, "Your days are numbered, Bryan Danielson," explaining that the reason he didn't cash in his opportunity to become champion was that it wasn't the right time to strike. What I appreciate about this moment is that he reminds the audience he won a contract in a tournament at the Wembley Stadium show, allowing him to challenge for the World Championship anytime, anywhere. This is reminiscent of the Money in the Bank concept, where winners often capitalize on champions who are injured or fatigued. It's great that he contextualizes this for the audience, while simultaneously creating a sense of threat, since we don't know when he might choose to cash in. The next segment features a promo with Don Callis and Will Ospreay. Don wants Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher to become a tag team, but Ospreay responds that he's too busy defending his international title and has a full schedule. Don counters by reminding Ospreay that he still owes him a favor. This establishes Callis as someone not to be trifled with. If Ospreay doesn't comply, he could face dire consequences. There's a complex dynamic here because Ospreay views Callis as a father figure and mentor, while Callis has a history of seeking revenge on those who betray him. During this segment, Kyle Fletcher mentions that he and Ospreay would make a great tag team, referencing their history as a successful duo on the independent circuit. Takeshita appears visibly upset as he witnesses Ospreay and Fletcher pursuing the tag team titles. He has expressed online that he wants to win gold and feels he's not being utilized to his full potential. This adds another layer of intrigue, as Ospreay and Fletcher's ambition to succeed as a tag team could lead to serious repercussions for Ospreay if they fail to capture the titles. Although Ospreay was allowed to leave the Callis family with a blessing, the looming threat of retaliation remains. Takeshita's dissatisfaction and his desire to chase gold suggest potential conflict within the family, leaving viewers uncertain about his next move. This unpredictability contributes to the excitement of the company's storytelling. The first match of the show featured Lio Rush versus Jack Perry. Lio operates as a high-flying wrestler, while Jack Perry takes on the role of a brawler. Unfortunately, there was a very long commercial break that took me out of the action. During the match, Action Andretti interfered to help Lio, but the referee sent him backstage, which left me feeling confused. I thought Lio was part of Shane Taylor Promotions. Am I mistaken about that? In the match, Lio Rush executed a Poison Rana, and Jack Perry responded with several Snapdragon suplexes, ultimately finishing the match with a knee strike. I was curious about how they would follow up, especially since Jack Perry is clearly upset about losing to Bryan Danielson for the heavyweight championship at the pay-per-view. They did this through a backstage segment where he cryptically states, "People like me are crucified so we can live on forever in the afterlife." While I understand the appeal of being mysterious, this felt a bit out of character for him. I'm definitely interested to see what his next feud will be. I was pleased with the next segment featuring Hangman Adam Page. I give AEW credit for including him, especially since his match with Swerve Strickland has been widely discussed. It wouldn't make sense for him not to be featured, just like how after Strickland became champion following the Dynasty pay-per-view, but wasn't seen on the following Dynamite. During his segment, Hangman says, "I meant every word of the blood I shed." He warns that if anyone tries to protect Strickland, he will hurt them. Hangman picks fights with Top Flight in the Dark Order before confronting Jeff Jarrett, who is still upset with Hangman for putting his hands on his wife. This leads to a brawl between them. I hope this doesn't set up a rematch between Adam Page and Jeff Jarrett, as Jarrett isn't the right opponent for him. Hangman needs to face a top babyface in the future, but I'm unsure who that might be. They also need to ensure that Hangman's story doesn't continually circle back to Swerve Strickland. Overall, I'm proud of many of the setups throughout the AEW show. However, I disagreed with the next segment where Private Party and Commander were attacked by Jon Moxley's faction. Moxley then spoke on the microphone, declaring, "Diplomacy has failed. Diplomacy is ours." I found this cryptic and somewhat unnecessary, especially since he had 3 segments tonight. It felt like the show was becoming overly reliant on promos. While it's important to establish stories, there needs to be a balance. Too many matches or too many promos, especially from the same individuals, can detract from the overall experience. However, this did set the tone for the night, as it seemed to build toward Darby Allin eventually confronting Jon Moxley. The second match of the night featured Ricochet versus Sammy Guevara. Although many fans were excited about this matchup due to both wrestlers' high-flying styles, I found myself less interested because it felt predictable that Ricochet would win. This outcome seems to be part of the setup for Ricochet versus Will Ospreay at WrestleDream. Additionally, it's concerning that Sammy Guevara, as the Ring of Honor Tag Team Champion, is losing in singles matches, especially considering the pattern of Ring of Honor Tag Champions consistently losing when they compete solo. It was also jarring to see them portrayed as equally matched at the beginning of the match, given that Ricochet is the more established veteran and physically larger competitor. This disparity made it hard to believe they were on the same level. One particularly ridiculous moment came when they spent more than 10 seconds outside the ring. Despite this not being a last man standing or no disqualification match, Sammy climbed the entrance tunnel and executed a moonsault onto Ricochet. Back in the ring, Ricochet performed a double jump senton off the fan barricades, followed by a running standing shooting star press. Sammy countered with a Canadian destroyer and then executed a top rope dive into a cutter. Ricochet hit a big vertical finisher, but was soon attacked by the Beast Mortos, likely setting up a future match between Ricochet and Mortos for Collision. Sammy Guevara then used a chair to scare Mortos away, allowing both Ricochet and Sammy to remain babyfaces. I didn't particularly enjoy this match because the pacing felt off. They moved a bit slowly, likely to save some of the more exciting spots for the anticipated Ricochet versus Ospreay showdown. It makes sense to avoid overexposing Ricochet too soon. The next segment featured an impressive promo from Kazuchika Okada. I'm glad to see Okada improving as a promo, especially considering he's not a native English speaker. He manages to inject humor into his delivery while maintaining an arrogant and disrespectful persona that resonates well with the crowd. During the segment, Don Callis and Konosuke Takeshita approached Okada while Rene Dupree conducted the interview. After Callis attempted to set up a match between Takeshita and Okada for the Continental title, Okada called Callis a bitch. Takeshita's anger was palpable, especially given his recent comments about wanting to prove himself and feeling underutilized. This creates a compelling narrative between the arrogant Okada and the ambitious Takeshita, who, despite being part of a villainous faction, seeks to win championships. I appreciate that they're taking their time to build this storyline rather than rushing into a match, which is especially impressive given that both wrestlers are Japanese and speak limited English. This approach breaks the stereotype that Japanese wrestlers must scream in their native language or act like they're mute. Instead, they effectively use dialogue and body language to convey their motivations. Okada's desire for preferential treatment due to his connections with company executives contrasts sharply with Takeshita's determination to fight for recognition. As a fan of Konosuke Takeshita, I'm excited to see where this storyline leads. Darby Allin came to the ring, and I found myself wondering what it would be like if he had a female partner, similar to how Jon Moxley has Marina Shafir. Perhaps it could be Abaddon, given that both she and Darby wear face paint, or Nyla Rose, who is known for her great personality. During the segment, Darby stated, "I want to be like you. You are not a sellout. You respect the indies, and you gave me confidence. After you attacked Bryan Danielson, I wanted nothing more than to be like you." Jon Moxley responded, "You are not ready to be world champion. Hand over your world title shot." Darby shot back, "You must be drinking again," which was a harsh jab, considering Moxley has publicly battled alcoholism and even went to rehab years ago. He called Moxley a hypocrite for his behavior. Darby then offered Moxley a chance to earn his heavyweight title shot, setting up a match at Grand Slam. While I have mixed feelings about this development, I thought it was a great promo. They kept it short and to the point, and I appreciated that Moxley wasn't on the rest of the card, as overexposing him could diminish his impact. However, it's concerning that Darby versus Bryan Danielson has been advertised for the show, and now it's being changed to Moxley versus Darby. The only appeal of Moxley versus Darby lies in their shared hardcore wrestling styles, which could lead to a violent and controversial match. With WrestleDream as the next pay-per-view in Tacoma, it would make more sense to save the Darby versus Bryan matchup for a Washington State crowd, as both wrestlers hail from that area and would likely draw a significant audience. Later in the show, Nigel McGuinness received permission from Tony Khan to challenge Bryan Danielson at Grand Slam in a non-title match. While it's exciting for those familiar with McGuinness and his independent wrestling background, I can imagine many fans attending Grand Slam feeling disappointed by the change in the main event. It feels like AEW is attempting to cater to a niche audience, reminiscent of the Dave Meltzer-style matches that feature dream opponents, but sometimes they include wrestlers that the majority of fans may not recognize. Last year, for instance, Bryan faced Zack Sabre Jr., a name that many casual fans might not know since he primarily wrestles in Japan. AEW needs to tread carefully, as featuring lesser-known wrestlers can detract from the overall appeal of the show. After the Darby and Moxley segment, Excalibur, the ring announcer, mentioned September 11th, and then Mariah May came out. This transition was a bit confusing. I wasn't sure if they were trying to have her interrupt the mention of 9/11, or if they intended to hold a moment of silence for the occasion and then have Mariah May come out, disrupting the event. It would be very similar to how in the WWE they announced that the Big Show's daddy passed away, just for the Big Boss Man too. Charge out and disrupt the moment of silence for heel heat. If they aimed to honor the day, it would have been more appropriate to open the show with graphics of the World Trade Center, rather than briefly mentioning it in the middle of the show. Moreover, having a wrestler disrespect such a significant event, especially on its anniversary, feels inappropriate. It's akin to hypothetically disrupting a somber moment during a school shooting anniversary candlelight vigil to promote a villain character. Such actions could come off as disrespectful and tone-deaf, diverting attention from important real-life events for the sake of entertainment. The next match featured Queen Aminata versus Mariah May in a contender match, meaning the winner would need to defeat the champion in 2 separate matches to claim the women's championship. Both competitors exchanged holds, showcasing their skills, with Aminata working best as a high-speed wrestler. Mariah landed a dropkick to Aminata's back, while Aminata responded with a snap suplex followed by a German suplex. Mariah then executed a running move into her Storm Zero finisher. While the match had its moments, I feel that AEW desperately needs a contender match where someone actually wins the title. In the entire 5-year history of AEW, I don't believe anyone has won a title under these stipulations, nor has anyone won even one of 2 matches in this format. Post-match, Mariah May expressed her desire for Mina Shirakawa to celebrate her victory upon winning the title. However, this feels futile since most fans are not familiar with Mina, a Japanese wrestler who isn't featured regularly on the show. The penultimate match featured the Learning Tree against the Iron Savages. I wasn't particularly looking forward to this match, as the Iron Savages often rely on comedy, which can detract from the credibility of larger wrestlers. AEW already has an issue with big men frequently losing, and the comedic angle doesn't help when you have a team of larger wrestlers who seem indifferent to winning. There was also a comedic element during the match, particularly with Chris Jericho wearing a $7,000 white jacket that was drenched in orange juice, a callback to when Orange Cassidy dumped gallons of orange juice on him from the ceiling years ago. Big Bill and Boulder received some meat chants while wrestling, and Big Bill delivered a big boot. Brian Keith hit the Diamond Dust finisher, allowing Chris Jericho to score the pinfall. I like this aspect since the heels got a decisive win in a squash match, but overall, I found the match predictable. While Jericho plays an obnoxious heel well, his style isn't my cup of tea. I find it less captivating. However, I did enjoy the segment where Orange Cassidy appeared on the screen with Mark Briscoe and Kyle O'Reilly, using a bulldozer to dump $7,000 worth of change onto Jericho's brand new Bentley. This moment brought a smile to my face, as it was corny yet funny to see Jericho overreact. I appreciated that they opted to dump quarters rather than destroy the car, as the feud doesn't warrant such extreme measures. Looking ahead, I hope both the Conglomeration and the Learning Tree can continue their feud or pursue the AEW Trios titles or ROH 6-man titles. Overall, the show served as a solid follow-up to All Out, effectively transitioning into the Grand Slam show in 13 days. The storytelling and character development were commendable, setting up intriguing feuds ahead of their special events, such as Grand Slam, the Anniversary Show, Night of Champions, and the WrestleDream pay-per-view. However, I felt that having Jon Moxley speak 3 times throughout the show was somewhat repetitive. I would rate the show a solid 8 out of 10.